All right, welcome everyone. We are going to be chatting all about mindful eating hacks. And in particular, I'm going to be covering 6 tips that you can use within your practice with your patients and your clients. So if you have any questions or comments, please drop them below this evening, and I would be happy to answer those. I'll come back to questions throughout the live and, in the future if you're dropping questions below as well. So let's dive into some mindful eating hacks for you and your clients. All right, screen share is coming and let's do the thing. Okay, so what we're going to be covering today is a quick little overview of what is mindful eating first. Then we're going to dive into mindful eating versus mindless eating. Then we'll talk about the benefits of mindful eating, some research on some mindful eating, and then how to get mindful eating put into your practice or your patient's practice. And then lastly, we'll be covering those 6 mindful eating hacks that you can share with your clients. So first things first, what is mindful eating? One of the best definitions that I love actually comes from the Center of Mindful Eating, and they define mindful eating as choosing to eat food that is pleasing, nourishing, and involves all of your senses. And I like to add something in addition to that, because I think food should be pleasing, nourishing, and involve all of our senses. But I also think that mindful eating can help us to feel better after we're done eating that meal. So I like to just add that additional piece. But mindful eating includes becoming aware of really some questions that we need to ask ourselves, getting curious. Why are we eating? When are we eating? Where are we eating? And how are we eating the foods that we're consuming? So when we're eating, are we eating when we're truly hungry? Or are there cues that are coming up for us? Are we having emotions that are arising? Why are we eating? And then eating based on your body's needs. The next is paying attention to how the food impacts our emotional well-being and our physical well-being. And so what we're going to do is, again, eat with the goal of feeling better when we're finished with that meal than we did when we started. So mindful eating should start with this question of, okay, is eating this food going to make me feel better when I'm done? And that includes all foods, right? So there's going to be that question whether it is what some people call our favorite rabbit food saying, which is if it's a salad or if it is dessert, are these foods going to bring about the feeling that I'm searching for when I'm done? And is it a volume thing? Then we want to talk about the responses of those foods to when we're eating them. Do we like them or do we dislike them? A big part of mindful eating is actually paying attention to the way the food tastes. I've had lots of clients that have actually started leaving food in their mouth. And when they do leave the food in their mouth, they do recognize that, oh, I don't know if I even like the taste of this food. Maybe it is just the salt or the sweetness of it. And so maybe there is something else that I would prefer instead. And that creates more opportunities to create change. The other piece is observing the situations that we're in non-judgmentally. So again, getting curious, looking at our circumstances and looking at it in a way that's non-judgmental, because that allows us again to create opportunities for change. All right, so let's dive into what is the difference between mindless eating and mindful eating. So let's just be real. We all live in an incredibly busy life, and that can lead to us barely having time to eat, barely having time to take lunches or breaks. A lot of times we are distracted when we're eating. A lot of times we're eating through lunches, and we may not chew foods thoroughly. We may not be thinking about swallowing when we're swallowing our foods, and we may actually swallow too quickly, right? So we may end up eventually eating more than we really want to. As a refresher, there is some research out there that suggests that our stomach takes some time to notify our brain that maybe it's 15, 20, 30 minutes to register to our brain that we're actually satisfied or full from a meal. So let's talk about mindless eating. Mindless eating is eating past full and ignoring our body's signals that we are full or satisfied. Sometimes we haven't been taught or trained how to recognize those cues. We also may be eating when emotions tell us to. I hear a lot of clients talk to me about, I'm eating because I'm bored, Rochelle. I'm really struggling with that. I recognize it, but it's just like, okay, I'm bored. I'm either going to get on my phone or I'm going to go eat something. So we can use that data, get curious, right? Well, what is it that you're looking to do? What are you looking to achieve with the food, with the phone? And sometimes it's just, I want to fill time. And if they're just looking to fill time, are there other activities that they would like to do to fill time that they hadn't thought of? Who knows? Who knows? Mindless eating also includes eating at random times and places. And so that could be emotion related as well. And it can be eating foods that are emotionally comforting. Makes sense. We all do that. And so again, helping people connect with mindless eating versus mindful eating. Additionally, mindless eating includes eating and multitasking. We know that multitasking is not something that works real great. So if we're doing something else while we're eating, we're less likely to be paying attention to how those foods make us feel. Another piece with mindless eating is basically considering a meal as only the end product versus what the outcomes of that is it's going to provide to us, right? So if we are mindlessly eating, we may say, hey, I'm just super hungry. It doesn't matter what I am eating. I just need to be eating because I am hungry, and not thinking about the quality of those foods, how it is going to make us feel, etc. So then what does that mean about mindful eating? Well, we talked a bit about what the definition of mindful eating is, but it is coming back to, again, listening to our body, listening to those hunger and fullness cues that tell us when we're ready to eat and when we're ready to stop eating so we feel our best. Mindful eating also includes eating when our stomach is growling, or maybe we have low energy, or we're starting to just think about food. All of us are going to have different hunger cues that we need to start paying attention to. So that can be really helpful just to tie into, what do I notice that my body is telling me? What are the cues? And how do I associate that with my hunger fullness cues? The other piece is, when we are eating mindfully, it's really important to eat with intention. Think about what we are doing when we are eating, and that can be a game changer. That's why food logging can be so powerful for some people, for many of us, right? Is that if we are actually having to pay attention to what we are eating with intention, it's more likely that we're going to create some changes, because then we are eating with intention versus mindlessly eating and just maybe eating and drinking things because we see that they're available. And it may not be even that we want them, they're just available, right? So other things to keep in mind with mindful eating is looking for foods that, again, make us feel good, and considering where food comes from. So this can be important for many folks that are looking for sustainable food choices. If they're looking for things that are grown locally, those can be part of that mindful eating practice. But it is important for us to help our clients identify where their mindful eating priorities lie. So here are some additional questions. I talked a little bit about this before with mindful eating. Some questions that folks can start asking themselves when they are mindfully eating. So why do I eat? If they're asking this question to explore triggers, this can bring up things such as physical hunger cues, or looking at visual cues. Sometimes there's, all of the banners or commercials or ads on our social media platforms that can drive folks to eating foods, and that can be on their algorithm, right? So there can also be pieces of stress and fatigue and boredom. So that can be something that we can start asking our clients. What is it about your eating pattern? So why is it that you are choosing to eat? What is the trigger? The other piece is, when do I eat? The answer may depend on the clock on the wall. So they may be looking at the clock and saying, okay, it's 8 o'clock, it's time for breakfast, it's noon, it's time to eat. This can be a huge trigger for some folks to eat versus paying attention to those hunger and fullness cues. The next question is, what do I eat? What do I eat means examining the things that people are choosing and also looking at taste, the comfort, the nutrition, and food access as far as what they are choosing to eat or what they have access to. So helpful questions may include, what do I eat? What do I want? What do I need? And what do I have? So again, I'll repeat those. What do I eat? What do I want? What do I need? And what do I have? So the what do I eat, just gives us the overview of those food choices. The what do I want, what sounds good, right? What do I need ties into nutrition and dietary recommendations. And what do I have means, what do I have access to here at home? Or am I going out to a restaurant? So what do I have access to? The next question is, how do I eat? So when we're talking about how do I eat in a rushed manner? Do I eat very quickly, or do I eat in a slow pace? This can be huge as far as how much food that we consume in a short period of time. Also, am I eating mindfully? Do I eat distracted, or am I aware? And do I eat in secret? Do I hide food? Because that can be a huge awareness for folks. Am I hiding foods from my family? Am I trying to kind of, not allow them to know that I'm eating this? Is there shame behind some of the choices that I'm making? Because again, that can open a lot of conversations about food choices. The next question is, how much do I eat? So this is basically that quantity piece. How much quantity of this food do I choose to eat to feel satisfied? And does that lead to fullness, or am I still hungry? So looking at all of those pieces within the eating pattern and the eating structure of their day. And then the last piece, the last question is, where do I eat, or where do I invest my energy? So this is a piece to think about when folks are eating. They may be eating to gain energy because they were, not having enough energy, or they may be eating and that is leading to sluggishness. So paying attention to, where am I investing my energy? Am I investing my energy in eating because I need more energy, or am I investing my energy and it's leading to, feeling more sluggish? Can what I'm doing lead to more shame and guilt? So these are things to really ask. The why, when, what, how much, and where are some really good questions to start with. So this is just an overview of the "Are you hungry?" discussion. So this can start the conversation. Why are you eating? Well, it's lunchtime, or it's been 2 hours, or I haven't eaten since blank. So that can be some of the things that come up for folks when they're asking the question of, why are you eating? The next question might be, why aren't you eating if you're hungry? Well, there may be the judgment. I shouldn't be hungry already because I ate 2 hours ago. Or I just had lunch an hour ago. I shouldn't be eating, but I'm noticing these cues, but I'm going to ignore it because of these answers. So instead, really working with our clients to respect their hunger cues and working with them to figure out, what might have been missing at that previous meal that maybe they can include now, right? To make them feel more satisfied and carry them over, so they're not waiting until they're ravenous again and then leading to that mindless eating piece. All right, so let's talk about the benefits of mindful eating. We know through the research that there are a lot of benefits, such as optimizing digestion. It increases awareness of the sources of food and where food is coming from. It does help folks foster deeper connections with their family, because if they are mindfully eating, they're more likely not distracted. They may decide to sit down as a family and have those conversations that can be really powerful to connect. And we all know the connection is so important right now and always. Also, with the benefits of mindful eating, we learn to enjoy what we're eating, regardless of whether it's healthy or not. And that can lead to an awareness of, maybe I'm satisfied with less than I thought previously. When we have increased satisfaction, again, we also know that we are more likely to choose more variety of foods. And if we're choosing more variety of foods, we're more likely to feel full because we're allowing our body enough time, our stomach, to tell our brain that we're full. Benefits of mindful eating also includes basically helping us make better choices for us, because if we are eating mindfully, we're looking at those choices and saying, will this choice benefit future me, right? How does this food make me feel? And if it makes me feel better, that is going to be something that I might choose more often, and to create those positive changes. So we know also that mindful eating can bring about those changes, because with mindful eating, this can bring about more awareness of physical cues to eat. So we might recognize our hunger cues earlier and satiety or fullness cues earlier if we're paying attention to those cues. We also, if we're eating mindfully, might start recognizing when we're wanting to eat emotionally. And if we do recognize those emotions, we might say to ourselves, okay, is there something else that I need? Because the food isn't going to take care of that emotional need because of past experiences and past, data collection, I like to call it. So if there's something else that I need, mindful eating is also one of the most effective in binge eating, emotional eating, and disordered eating, because it is something that we can do to make that connection with what is going on internally with us and then decide to do something different. But it is basically creating that space or that pause. There is mixed and limited research for weight management at this time with mindful eating, but we do know that creating a positive relationship with food is such a powerful mechanism. So most of the research that has been done with mindful eating has been on female populations, overweight populations, and basically focused on the outcomes related to binge eating and eating disorders. So this is really important to know with mindful eating, but there is more research to come. So just being aware of that piece. So mindful eating in your practice, why is this important? Well, mindful eating is really a positive message that can be very helpful for our clients, just connecting with their why they're choosing to do certain things, what is going on with them emotionally. It creates more focus on the behavior, because if they're able to recognize the behaviors or the triggers, that creates more of that self-efficacy, right? So instead of them coming back and say, hey, did I do okay? They can ask themselves these questions and say, you know what, I recognize this cue. It led me to make this decision. And that can create such like internal strength and pride for our clients. So it's really powerful. And we know with mindful eating, that can lead to long-term behavior change. Now, is it an overnight thing? No, it takes time. Mindfulness is a practice. Just like with anything else, it's that day-to-day practice that's so important that all of us do. So this can be part of our medical nutrition therapy recommendations, is just connecting those dots with hunger fullness cues, with checking in with the emotions that we're feeling, but that can be something to consider with mindful eating in your practice. All right, guys. So are you ready for those 6 mindful eating hacks that we can pull into our practice? Let's dive in. So the overview of these guys, I'll zip through these and make them just a quick overview, but one of them is becoming aware of your environment. The second one is using all 5 of your senses. So that's really important for mindful eating. We need to tie into all of the things that we're seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing. So we're experiencing that food when we're consuming it. We also need to tie into hunger and fullness, and that can also include satisfaction. There is a distinction between fullness and satisfaction. We also want to try to limit distractions with our clients, have them slow down, and perhaps use a food journal, because that mindfulness can really be helpful for some folks. It doesn't have to be long-term. It can be short-term tool just so they get comfortable with the hunger fullness cues, maybe the times of days when they're noticing certain things, and that data can be really helpful with emotions that come up as well. So let's dive into this. So I want to just ask the question, which space may lead to more mindful eating between these two? And just have your audience or your clients ask themselves when they are at home, what does their space look like? What does their food prep area look like? What does their dining area look like? Does it create a conducive environment for them to mindfully eat? What about this space? Which one is going to be more inviting for a mindful eating practice for your clients? The next piece to consider is eating with all of our five senses, excuse me. Once you limit distractions, then paying attention to how food looks, how it smells, what textures are included in the meal. Oh my goodness, if there is crunch and soft and just basically kind of some curious little pops in there and all sorts of things, and maybe some chewy, that can be such a satisfying meal if all of those different textures are included. Flavor is also so important. So is it seasoned well? If it's bland, it may not be very enjoyable or satisfying. So what does it taste like? We also want to notice, this goes along with the texture piece, is the sounds. What's going on with the sounds of the food? Can we hear, some things going on within our mouth? Is it searing when it comes to the table? There's different things, the way food sounds, the way that we, cut it on our plate, it may have a certain sound. The way that we scoop up soup may have a certain sound. The way that we drink tea may have a certain sound. So all of these things can be a really important part of a mindful eating practice. So it is important to review all of those senses with your clients, such as, again, sight. What does their food look like? What does it smell like? What is the touch of it if they're eating it with their hands? What does it feel like? What does it feel like in their mouth? And then what does it taste like? And what are the sounds that they experience with the food? The next piece with mindfulness, and another mindful eating hack that you can include with your practice, is doing the hunger fullness scale and having your clients ask themselves frequently throughout the day, how hungry am I? Am I hungry 0 or a 10? And the recommendation with the hunger fullness scale is trying to keep ourselves between 3 and 7 most often, to prevent getting to uncomfortable hunger, which can lead to mindless eating and eventually get to uncomfortable fullness. So using that hunger fullness scale can be a great strategy or a great mindful eating hack for us and our clients to use in our practice. Then, as we know, with mindful eating, really paying attention to distractions. Are we eating without looking at screens? Are we, trying to eat when we're working? If we're distracted, we're not going to be paying attention to what our body is telling us about those foods. We're going to be more focused on what we're distracted by. So the other piece is creating some gratitude or some space for our meal, slowing down, taking your distractions away, coming to a space where you're meant to eat, sit down and actually have that awareness of connecting with your food, connecting with your family or your partners or friends, and having those conversations that we all so need. Also, with limiting distractions, try to sit quietly for 30 seconds and just pay attention to what is on your plate. And, again, this can be a great practice with mindfulness, is looking at your plate and thinking about where those foods came from and all of the steps that it took to get those foods from the field onto your plate. There's so many miraculous things that happen. With distractions too, we do want to make sure that we're smelling our food and thinking about, oh, I already said this part, but thinking about where it came from, and just paying attention to, again, those sensations. Then the other piece is paying attention to physical movements. So with that piece, I don't often think about my arm. So I'm going to, bring my tea up to my face here, but I don't often think about my arm movement. I'm thinking more about the mug itself. And so just this practice right here and now, I'm noticing that, oh my goodness, which muscles are actually working. It's cool. Yeah. So all of us, all of us within this practice can, again, be surprised by these little things time and time again. And then there is some things for some folks might be Little tips to help them slow down is chewing their food a certain amount of time. That can help. Some people say 10 to 15 times. Sometimes I talk to my clients about chewing their food until it all has a similar texture before they swallow, because then, they're not having to actually obsessively chew. But that can be something where they have that uniform texture of their food before they swallow to slow down a little bit. All right, so speaking of slowing down, these are some other strategies. Now, again, these are things that we can suggest to our patients and clients, but it's always up to them to see what's going to work best for them. So do they want to eat with chopsticks? Do they want to eat with their non-dominant hand? Some of these may not work, right? Do they want to eat while they're sitting down versus standing up? Do they want to set their utensils down between bites just as a reminder or a mindful connection? Do they want to take sips of water or tea or, black coffee or whatever works for them between bites? Does that work for their medical nutrition therapy? That's going to be up to you as far as what is going to be clinically indicated. And then put reasonable portions on the plate to try to make that meal last for the 20 minutes. And so, again, just using that time to slow down. I have some clients that literally set a timer and they say, okay, I'm going to give myself 20 minutes to eat a meal, and then I'm going to assess how I feel. What is my hunger, fullness cues at that point? And that works well for some. For other people, it doesn't. But those can be some strategies for helping us slow down a little bit. The sixth tip, I believe, is going to be using a food journal. So food journals can be super powerful when we are thinking of mindful eating. They can help us track hunger and fullness cues, as well as stress, motions, what time of day that we're eating, what types of foods that we're choosing based off all of those things, to come back to why we are choosing these foods. Basically, what do we have? What do I want? What do I need? Going back to those questions, that can really create some space for change. All right, so some additional tips if you're interested in these is having your, audience, your patients, or your clients recruit somebody to work with mindful eating with them to share that experience. That can be really powerful. And also just reinforce time and time again that there is no judgment around mindful eating. It is really, I like to say that it's data collection. We're just collecting data. There's no judgment. We're looking at what is working well for you and what isn't. And once we know what isn't working well for you, then we can decide how we're going to pivot and move forward from there. So the other piece with additional tips is stopping and thinking before we eat. So this is coming back to creating that intention around eating. And again, coming back to the non-judgment. There's really a big need for forgiveness and compassion around food choices, because it is such a complicated relationship based off of every single individual's history with food. It can be so complicated. So learning how to forgive and have compassion around food is so important. The other piece to keep in mind is helping folks set realistic expectations. Mindfulness is something that is a long game. This is not something that is going to be an easy practice that they'll be able to get overnight. It really does take time. And if they are patient with the process, it's amazing the things that they can come up with in sessions where it's just so fun to reflect back to them what they've just said. And then they're like, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I love this. It does create a lot of data. So again, that data is information that can help us, create the change for these folks. Also, letting people know that there is a lot of information out there on mindfulness in general. So if they are interested in doing their own research for mindfulness, they can check that out in very many different places. And if you have your own favorite resources, it's great to share those as well, just so folks aren't feeling overwhelmed by all the information that is out there. All right, so let's see. What we covered today is what is mindful eating, the mindful eating hacks, benefits of mindful eating, research on mindful eating in your practice, and some 6 mindful eating hacks. So I'm going to stop sharing here and check and see if there's any questions or comments in the chat, and then just summarize briefly those 6 mindful eating hacks. All right, so coming back over here. Let's see. Okay, going into the chat box. I am not seeing any, but let me see. I'm going to expand it a little bit here and see if there are any. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. The hunger scale is so helpful. Absolutely, Meg. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is a powerful, powerful tool. And I love, yes, absolutely. Great comparison of mindful and mindless eating. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback, my dear. All right. So just to summarize what those 6 mindful eating hacks are, number 1, become aware of your environment. So is your environment, more cluttered or organized? Which one is more inviting for you when you're wanting to mindfully eat? Number 2, use all of your 5 senses. So we want to make sure when we're mindful eating, we're using our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, and our sense of touch. So we are using everything. We're fully enthralled and invested in that meal. We also want to explore the hunger fullness scale and dive into those cues that come up for us as individuals. Also, limiting distractions can be a great hack. So figuring out what is going to work for your clients. It may be really hard and challenging for them to put a screen away right away, but they may be open to turning their phone over on like a kitchen counter and setting a timer for 5 minutes to start. So working on those realistic goals that can work for folks can be super powerful. The hack number 5 is slowing down. So there's so many different strategies to help folks slow down, but finding things that work for them. You can share a lot of different tips and tricks, but use the things that resonate with them. The last one is using a food journal. We can use the food journal in so many different ways to create awareness and mindfulness around eating, but this may not work for everybody. So just keep in mind, we can become more aware of our environment, use all 5 of our senses, discover the hunger fullness scale, limit distractions, slow down, and use a food journal. So I hope tonight was really helpful for everybody. If you do have additional questions or comments about these 6 mindful eating hacks, drop them below. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Good night, everybody.